All right.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Brian Jesus Clark, and this speech this evening will be my informative presentation for COM 231. The topic I have chosen for this informative speech is security. During this presentation, we will cover important questions such as, why is security important? What services do security professionals provide? We will briefly cover the history of security, as well as answering the most intriguing and important question of all. What is my role? As I previously stated, my name is Brian Jesus Clark. I am currently licensed by the Personnel Protective Services Bureau of North Carolina and work as a security officer in the state of North Carolina. I am qualified to speak on this subject and can be considered somewhat of a subject matter expert. Private security began in ancient times, when man began to domesticate animals, amass much wealth, encompass goods, personal property, livestock, family, and man, of course, felt the need to protect these things. The researcher and author Milton Lipton perhaps put it best when he stated, "The very first security guard very well may have been the nomadic shepherd." The first conscious outcry or public need on a grand scale for security perhaps happened in ancient Rome. The poet and historian Junival gives us a brief description of what the atmosphere must have been like in those days in Rome, and a turbulent time it must have been, treacherous to go out at night even. For he tells us, only a fool would go out to dinner without having first prepared his will. Definitely an atmosphere where security would have been much needed and much appreciated. Security today. In a world where local police departments, sheriff's offices, emergency managers are often overwhelmed by the amount of calls, statewide budget cuts, as well as constantly being understaffed, need an additional force to augment their own. Many of the benefits of having a qualified, properly licensed security officer on your property is increased response time to such calls as domestic violence, burglary, medical emergencies, emergency 911 calls, vandalism, and many times your first responder, such as a security guard, is the first person to arrive on scene, the first person to apprehend a suspect, to chase off an assailant, and oftentimes the first person to provide first aid. This brings us to the vast and broad topic of first responders. As previously stated, the security guard is perhaps your best known first responder. Since the tragic events on the day of September 11th, 2001, when we were attacked and the World Trade Centers came tumbling down on national TV for all to behold, this has forever changed the atmosphere of our everyday lives, our country, and even our homes. To quote the authors, Robert J. Fisher, Edward Halleback, and Gian Green, 9/11, this was a day in life in the United States, in the world, that forever changed us. Changed security as we had began to know it, and security itself began to evolve and is still evolving even today. In conclusion, We will answer that most intriguing question: what is my role in security? We previously spoke about the first responder and how important this element was in security. Well, I have news for you all this evening. You are the first responder, and many times the first responder is your role. In a world at threat with global terrorism, increased crime rates, violence, you are the greatest tool to aid and assist these sheriffs, local police departments, emergency medical personnel, even private security forces. Your ever vigilant eye is imperative to security itself. In conclusion, if something looks wrong, that's because it probably is. Take your role and take it proudly as a first responder. Do not be afraid to approach someone in uniform, such as myself. Do not be afraid to confront someone and say, hey, what are you doing? Do not be afraid, perhaps, to do something as simple as pick up a telephone and let someone know. Sometimes confronting a person is not always the best approach. But once again, it is your role and the role of the first responder to take action and at the very least pick up a telephone and let someone know. Your actions could save potentially hundreds of thousands of lives. There is no way to determine the amount of lives you could save with a simple phone call. The events on the morning of 9/11/2001 show us that. At this point, we will ask for questions from the audience in conclusion.
I got a question.
Yes, sir.
How long have you been doing security?
I worked in the private security sector for approximately 13 to 14 months now as a civilian, but as a military police officer, protective services was one of our main duties as well, and I served for approximately 10 years. So cumulatively, I would say close to 12 years of experience now. Any more questions?
I got another question.
Yes, sir.
How can I get involved and maybe get a job in security?
Well, in the state of North Carolina, you would petition the Personnel Protective Services Bureau. As I previously stated, I am licensed by such agency. And if you get with me after this presentation, I can definitely give you numbers, websites, perhaps even print you out an application, tell you the appropriate measures to take. If there are no further questions this evening, thank you all for listening, and good night.